Halo started as an RTS. At this point, I don't think that's news to anyone, Halo fan or otherwise. When Halo was to make the transition to RTS in 2009, it was quite a moment for many a Halo fan. Halo was returning to its roots in a major way, and Halo Wars would mark the first non-Bungie Halo title. Everyone was on the edge of their seats when Ensemble Studios unveiled their latest project. How would it play? How would it look? Could you have a non-shooter Halo? 8 years on, I think it's very safe to say that Ensemble nailed it in every regard. The game had a fun, simple story, played incredibly well for a console RTS, and delivered exactly what it had set out to do. Now, 8 years later, Halo Wars 2 has come, developed by a different studio, and the question on everyone's mind is, how is it? While I think my spoiler-free review from back in February still accurately answers that even now, today we'll start a journey as we examine in detail the story and lore of Halo Wars 2, its ups, its downs, and everything in between. No holding back on spoilers, so if you don't want any, I don't know why you're watching. While the main story begins on or around March 28, 2559, one could argue that the story truly starts during the Covenant War with the founding of the Banished. As we learn in the second cinematic, our main villain Atriox was of a particular brute clan that the Covenant loved to throw to death. 40 at a time, his clan would be sent on suicide missions, and 40 at a time, they would all die until Atriox didn't. Again and again, he would be sent out with his brothers only to return alone until he finally had enough. Atriox rebelled, and his rebellion inspired others to join him. By February of 2550, Atriox was successfully raiding both Covenant and UNSC outposts, stealing any tech he could get his hands on, and despite the efforts of both, he was never caught. Following the Covenant War, Atriox managed to seize a great deal of Covenant technology and continued to expand his force. To many of his fellow Geralhani, Atriox was a beacon of hope. To others, he was a way to fill the hole left by the Covenant. To all who knew him, he was feared. Atriox was a pragmatist, preferring to coerce his enemies to join him. Despite his treatment in the Covenant, he held no grudges against the Sangheili, and though Halo Wars 2 might make you think otherwise, I think Atriox would be more than willing to let even humans join his Banished. The only law is the law of Atriox. In May of 2553, he had been captured, but managed to persuade one of his captors, Shipmaster Let Valir, to let him go, and further, to join him. From then on, Let would work for Atriox. Just imagine that conversation, Atriox learning and then playing to Let's weaknesses, showing the shipmaster how he was no longer an enemy, how a partnership would be mutually beneficial. It speaks volumes of Atriox's brilliance. Then, sometime around March of 2558, Atriox discovered the location of the Ark, and with Let Valir's assault carrier, the Enduring Conviction, began the 8-month journey to the Forge of the Halos. There, he undoubtedly planned to acquire unrivaled power. And to note, he did not do this with a portal like we see in Halo 3. He did this with standard slipspace drives. That's why the journey took 8 months, rather than about a month as we see in Halo 3. Meanwhile, following a return to the Ark in 2555, the UNSC had been studying the installation and repairing the damage done to it in 2552. The Phoenix logs specifically chronicle the adventures of one Nathan Palmer, likely no relation, following his deployment in March of 2558. We also learn of Isabel's formal deployment to the Ark around this time. But I'm sure you know this song and dance. October 28th comes and the portal to Earth shuts down. The research teams on the Ark don't know it, but Ark and Cortana had just deployed her newly acquired Guardians across the galaxy. For reasons not yet known, the portal was shut down, locking Cortana out of easy access to the Ark and stranding those researchers. To make things worse, 1 month later on November 25th, Atriox and his Banished arrived. Over the next few months, they would hunt down and kill all humans stationed there until only the AI Isabel remained. Then they began harvesting the Forerunner and human technology. Here is where the story of Halo Wars 2 formally begins. Again, on or around March 28, 2559, someone or something on the Ark managed to activate the slipspace portal there, pulling the once lost Spirit of Fire to the massive installation. And as I'm sure you know, this plot point is never again addressed outside of this opening cutscene. I'm glad that they decided to address it right away, but the fact that we never even get a hint at what could have done this during the main campaign is a disappointment to say the least. I'm personally still banking on mendicant bias being responsible, but given the recent reveal of the Flood, I can't help but wonder if perhaps the Flood brought the Spirit to the Ark for some reason yet unknown. I really hope we get some solid details during the Awakening the Nightmare DLC. Anyway, on board, automated protocols set in place by the now gone Serena awaken the crew. The game properly opens with a great montage of the crew and ship awakening, set to a voiceover from Serena in the form of a short message left for Captain Cutter. Anyone who followed me during the development of Halo Wars 2 knows that I would have preferred if this title had been sent during the Covenant War, allowing us to say goodbye to Serena in-game. Looking back now, this might have been a little too much like Halo 4, but in any case, the final message to Cutter does, in my opinion, give us a proper goodbye. It could have been done better, but what we got definitely made me happy. Moving forward, the Spirit discovers a signal from the Ark's surface, UNSC in origin but on an unfamiliar band. Cutter sends Spartan Team Red to investigate. Spartans track the signal to the Henry Lamb Research Center. And fun fact, Henry Lamb was a scientist who lost his life during the return to the Ark in 2555. You can check out my Hunters in the Dark review if you want further details. Inside, they find a logistics AI named Isabel, the only survivor of what attacked the outpost. Before she can explain what's going on, a noise comes from further inside the research station. Jerome collects Isabel and they head inside. And though it's a small detail, I love how Jerome doesn't plug her into the back of his helmet, but rather into a side slot, much like we see the Chief do in Halo CE with Private Jenkins' helmet cam footage. This is Mark IV, so it can't actually interact with an AI like Mark V and 6 could. Instead, Jerome plugs her into a slot that historically was reserved for a helmet cam disc of sorts. It's a small detail, but one that I appreciate. Anyway, inside, Red Team encounters Atriox, our new main villain, and God, what an entrance! He fights off the Spartans with ease, even breaking Douglas's arm and armor. No small feat if you understand Mjolnir systems. Atriox also has this great line when he first knocks off Douglas's helmet.
As I suspected. Nothing but a man.
While the Master Chief is usually referred to as the Demon, the title of Demon was used for all Spartans, as that's what the Covenant saw them as. There were even rumors that the demons were undead creatures of a sort. This line from Atriox is a subtle but brilliant piece of writing showing that Atriox never believed in the horror stories of the demons and has now confirmed his suspicions. Anyway, Red Team retreats, calling in Archer missiles to take out the Banished forces that are chasing them. Douglas and Jerome manage to escape, but only because Alice holds off advancing Banished forces. Now, I do have to criticize this moment, even though it leads into some awesome levels later on. First, when the hell did Alice get that turret? Second, couldn't she have just used the turret on the Warthog? It would have accomplished the same goal. And third, when did the Archer missiles stop firing? A better way to do this, in my opinion, would have been to have Alice use the Warthog's chain gun, then get bombed by Banshees as Jerome was helping Douglas to the evac Pelican. And of course the Archer missiles would still be firing, taking care of ground forces. You get the same result without as many questions, and it explains where Alice gets her chain gun for future levels. She just pulls it from the Hog's wreckage. Moving forward, Douglas and Jerome return to the Spirit, and Isabel reveals the history of Atriox and the events following the shutdown of the portal to Earth, trying to convince Cutter to run. However, Cutter delivers an amazing speech which, as I've said before, really endeared me to him. Still brings a tear to my eye even now. So, with their new resolve, the Spirit crew and Isabel prepare to strike back at the Banished. While Anders works on getting the portal to Earth reopened, Spirit forces led by Jerome make their first strike against the Banished, attacking a harvesting operation overseen by Decimus, Atriox's top lieutenant. During this, Jerome makes a note about the existing debris that they see across the Ark's surface. Isabel informs him about the Battle of Installation 00 in 2552 and the Master Chief's involvement. Jerome takes solace in the fact that John is still around. And side note, an earlier version of this had Jerome referring to John as the Chief, something myself and I know a few other lore fans weren't happy about. Thankfully they changed it to John in the final game. Anyway, after establishing a base and fighting through Banished forces, Spirit forces finally get Decimus' attention. Decimus teleports into the field in a powerful mech that wields a giant gravity mace, along with a few other abilities. However, Spirit forces are able to stave him off. As he leaves, Decimus orders an orbital strike to try and deny any intel to the UNSC, hitting his own men in the process. And I'll admit, this is something that somewhat confuses me. A big reason Atriox left the Covenant was seeing his clansmen pointlessly dying in battle. Now granted, that was for beliefs not their own, as Isabel puts it, and that was Atriox's motivation, not necessarily anyone else's. Still, it seems odd that he would even allow it. Anyway, as luck would have it, the UNSC does recover some intel referring to a cartographer. Given the information cartographers have and the danger it could pose in banished hands, the next mission quickly becomes secure the cartographer. An important note here is that the cartographer featured in Halo Wars 2 is not the same one we saw in Halo 3. As it turns out, there are several such locations on the Ark, which, given its size, does make sense. Much as I don't care for the newer Forerunner art style on the Ark, the majority of places we see are not those visited in Halo 3, never mind the renewed state of the Ark. So, there's that. We'll talk more about Forerunner designs later on. Anyway, Spirit forces, again under Jerome's leadership, are deployed to the area near the cartographer in order to secure passage to it. As they make their way to the site, they find dead Banished forces, and it isn't long after that they discover who attacked them: Sentinels. Seems that even without a monitor, the Sentinels have some basic protection protocols that are at least somewhat capable of fending off invaders. Somewhat. And pausing a moment, during an earlier section of this level, Jerome demonstrates his Mjolnir's built-in thrusters. Now this is a retcon to the Mark IV that was introduced in Halo The Fall of Reach animated series and confirmed again in Halo Mythos. Some who know a bit of the deeper lore in Halo Wars 2 might argue that by the time of the third mission, Jerome's armor had been upgraded with Gen 2 components, something that we know happens at some point due to the Spartan Blitz cards. However, we know that the upgraded armor does look different, matching the in-game appearance of Mjolnir. Given that Jerome's Mjolnir remains the same throughout the cutscenes, I think it's more likely that he's still wearing Mark IV. What we first see during Ascension is the Mark IV version of Mjolnir's thrusters, something far more crude than the precision thrusters integrated into Gen 2. Anyway, once a base is established, Anders informs Jerome on how to access the elevator that leads to the cartographer. Jerome's forces will need to capture and hold 3 towers. While basically the domination game type ripped straight from the multiplayer, it kinda reminds me of the Halo 3 mission The Covenant, when we have to shut down 3 towers to get to the Ark's Citadel. Anyway, as one would guess, Jerome and Spirit forces secure the towers, which allows them to access the elevator, which takes them up to the cartographer. The level ends as Anders is dropped in and Spirit forces prepare to advance. And that's where we're going to end things for now. So far in terms of story, we have, I'd say, a strong opening. It sets up our villain, introduces us to the new enemy, and readies us for the journey yet to come. Further, the gameplay and level design are very strong and slowly introduce you to new units and abilities. It could be argued that it's a bit too slow, but the pace isn't terrible. The major criticism for me, and this extends to the whole game, is the Forerunner art design. It's more reminiscent of Halo 4 and 5's art, especially with all the floaty bits. Canonically, since we're largely visiting new locations and since the Ark was recently renovated, it makes sense to see new architectural styles and to see that architecture in clean and pristine condition. Further, it'd be hard to use the locations from Halo 3 since those spaces were designed for a shooter, not an RTS. That said, I would have preferred if Creative Assembly had tried to mirror the more classic Forerunner designs, even if they stuck with the super chrome look of everything. It would have certainly helped longtime fans immerse themselves further into the levels, and hell, if you did that and then used the newer Forerunner style for the Halo Ring levels later on, it would help differentiate the locations. As it stands in the final game, they blend together a little too well, and not in a good way. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this first part. In the next episode, we'll get into the actions of Alice 130 and accessing the cartographer site, along with a deeper look into some of the Phoenix logs that accompany those levels. Until then, this has been Halo Canon, and thank you for watching. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing, and sharing it around. You are the reason I get to keep doing this, so thank you, profusely thank you.